I returned home after a life-threatening surgery to find my house eerily empty of my personal belongings. When I confronted my daughter Amanda about the missing items, she coldly responded, "We thought you weren't coming back, so we threw everything away." Devastated by this betrayal from my own flesh and blood, I sat on my stripped bed, pulled out my phone with trembling hands, and texted my lawyer. "You were right. Let's start acting according to the plan." Little did Amanda know what consequences awaited her callous actions. My name is Lionel Harrison, and at 67 years old, I never imagined I'd be fighting my own daughter for what rightfully belonged to me. Before all this happened, I was enjoying my retirement after 35 years as an engineering professor at the local university. I had worked hard all my life, saved diligently, and created what I thought was a secure future for myself and my family. 3 years ago, my beloved wife Marilyn passed away after a brutal 18-month battle with ovarian cancer. We had been married for 41 years, and losing her left a hole in my heart that never fully healed. Our modest 3-bedroom house in Cedar Grove, a quiet suburb of Lincoln, Nebraska, became both my sanctuary and a treasure trove of memories. Every corner held reminders of our life together. Photos from our travels, the antique furniture we had lovingly restored, and the garden Marilyn had nurtured with such care. After Marilyn died, our daughter Amanda became more present in my life, calling more frequently and visiting on weekends with her husband Frank and my grandchildren, Tyler and Haley. I treasured those visits, especially watching 17-year-old Tyler work on my classic 1967 Mustang with me in the garage, and 14-year-old Haley playing the piano Marilyn had taught her on. Everything changed about 18 months ago when Frank lost his job at the insurance company where he had worked for over a decade. Corporate restructuring, they called it. Amanda called me in tears one evening, explaining they were struggling with the mortgage payments on their house, and asked if they could move in with me temporarily while Frank found a new position. Of course, I agreed immediately. My house was too big for just me anyway, and I welcomed the company. At first, it was wonderful having them there. The house felt alive again with the sounds of family. I enjoyed cooking big Sunday dinners and helping the kids with their homework. But as weeks turned into months, I started noticing subtle changes in Amanda's behavior toward me. She became irritated when I would reminisce about Marilyn, or when I wanted to watch my old Western movies in the living room. Frank remained unemployed, claiming the job market was impossible for someone his age, though he seemed to find plenty of time for golf with his friends. By the 6-month mark of their stay, I was essentially confined to my bedroom and the garage, while Amanda had redecorated the living room without asking me, replacing Marilyn's handmade quilts with modern store-bought throws and removing family photos in favor of abstract art prints. My health had never been perfect. I had managed high blood pressure for years and had a minor heart attack back when I was 59. But last spring, I began experiencing severe chest pains and shortness of breath. After numerous tests, my cardiologist, Dr. Williams, delivered the sobering news. I needed a triple bypass, and there was significant risk due to my age and previous cardiac history. The evening after receiving this diagnosis, I called my oldest friend, James, who had been my roommate in college and was now a retired attorney. We met for coffee at the small diner near my house, and I confided my fears about the surgery. James listened carefully, then asked a question that caught me off guard. "Lionel, I need to ask you something uncomfortable. How has Amanda been acting since she moved in? Any concerning behavior regarding your finances or property?" I was surprised by the question, but James had always been perceptive. I shared my concerns about the changes in the household and Amanda's increasingly controlling behavior. James's expression grew serious. "I think we should create a contingency plan, just in case. I've seen similar situations go badly for the elderly parent." I bristled at being called elderly, but deep down, I knew James was looking out for me. We discussed some precautionary measures, though I felt slightly disloyal even considering that Amanda might have ulterior motives. That night, I returned home later than expected. As I approached the back door, I heard Amanda and Frank talking in the kitchen, not realizing I was within earshot. Mom's jewelry alone could fetch a good price, Amanda was saying. And Dad's car is worth at least $30,000, probably more to the right collector. If he makes it through the surgery, Frank replied. The doctor said there are significant risks. Well, it would certainly be convenient if he didn't, Amanda said, with a chuckle that froze my blood. We wouldn't have to wait to sell this place and move somewhere without all these old memories hanging around. I stood motionless on the back porch, my heart pounding painfully in my chest. My own daughter was discussing my death as a convenience. I quietly retreated to my car and drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what I had just heard. By the time I returned home, everyone was asleep, and I slipped into my bedroom, my mind racing with plans I never thought I'd need to make. The week before my surgery was a blur of medical appointments and quiet preparation. I called James the morning after overhearing Amanda and Frank's conversation, and we met in his office downtown. I need your help, I told him, my voice barely steady. I think you were right about Amanda. James listened without interruption as I recounted what I had overheard. When I finished, he didn't seem surprised, just deeply saddened. Unfortunately, I've seen this before, he said. Adult children who view their aging parents as financial resources rather than people. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next few days, James helped me document everything I owned of value. We took photographs of my possessions, made copies of financial statements, and updated my will to be ironclad, with James as the executor. I also gave him power of attorney for the duration of my hospital stay, something I had initially planned to give to Amanda. We decided against confronting her before the surgery. The situation was stressful enough, and I needed to focus on survival first. The day of my surgery arrived, and Amanda drove me to the hospital. Tyler and Haley came along, both teary-eyed and frightened. Tyler hugged me tightly before they wheeled me away. "I love you, Grandpa," he whispered. "Please come back to us." Amanda's goodbye was perfunctory, a quick peck on the cheek, and a good luck, Dad. As they rolled me toward the operating room, I caught a glimpse of her already on her phone, seemingly unbothered by the gravity of the moment. The surgery was more complicated than anticipated. What should have been a 5-hour procedure turned into 8, and I developed an infection afterward that extended my hospital stay from the expected week to 3 full weeks. During this time, Amanda visited sporadically, always with excuses about being busy with the kids or helping Frank with job applications. Tyler came more often, sneaking in after school and bringing me homemade cards from Haley. My primary nurse, Patricia, became something of a confidant during my extended stay. She was around my age, with grown children of her own, and had a sixth sense for when patients needed to talk. On her night shifts, she would often sit with me for a few minutes when the floor was quiet. "Your grandson seems like a good kid," she commented one evening. "He's the only one who brings you those crossword puzzles you like." "Tyler's got a good heart," I agreed. "Takes after his grandmother." Patricia hesitated, then said, "I probably shouldn't mention this, but I overheard your daughter and her husband in the hallway yesterday. They were discussing cleaning out your house, something about making room for new furniture." My heart sank, but I wasn't entirely surprised. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. That night, I used the hospital phone to call James when I knew Amanda wouldn't be visiting. "They're already starting," I told him. "We need to move faster with our plan." James had already put several measures in place. He had hired a discreet security company to install hidden cameras in the common areas of my home, with my permission as the homeowner. He had also arranged for a trusted former colleague to drive by my house daily and report any unusual activities, like moving trucks or unfamiliar cars. "I'm also keeping an eye on your bank accounts," James assured me. "No unusual activity so far, but I've put a fraud alert on your credit as a precaution." Despite the doctor's concerns about my slow recovery, I pushed myself in physical therapy, determined to get home as soon as possible. The thought of Amanda and Frank dismantling my life while I lay in a hospital bed gave me the motivation I needed to work through the pain. 2 weeks into my stay, Amanda visited with a stack of papers she claimed needed my signature for insurance purposes. I was heavily medicated for pain that day, and my vision was blurry without my reading glasses, which she conveniently hadn't brought. "Just sign here, Dad," she said, pointing to signature lines on multiple pages. "It's all standard stuff the insurance needs. Nothing to worry about." Foolishly, I trusted her and signed where she indicated, too weak and foggy from medication to insist on reading the documents myself. It wasn't until much later that I would discover what those papers really were, and by then, the damage was already done. On my 18th day in the hospital, Tyler visited alone after school. He seemed unusually subdued, avoiding eye contact. "What's wrong, Tyler?" I asked, reaching for his hand. He hesitated, then blurted out, "Mom and Dad sold your car yesterday, the Mustang. Some guy came and drove it away. I tried to stop them, but Dad said it was taking up space in the garage and you wouldn't need it anymore." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That car had been my retirement project, a connection to my younger days and the countless hours Marilyn and I had spent cruising down country roads with the windows down and music playing. I had planned to give it to Tyler on his 18th birthday, just a few months away. "Did they sell anything else?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Tyler looked down at his hands. "They've been taking stuff to a storage unit, and there was an estate sale company at the house yesterday. Mom said they were helping you downsize, because the doctor said you shouldn't live alone anymore." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my medication. "Thank you for telling me, Tyler. You're a good grandson." After he left, I called James again and told him what was happening. His response was immediate and firm. "I'm getting you out of there tomorrow. The doctors say you're stable enough for home recovery, and I'll arrange for home health care. We need to stop this now before there's nothing left." The next morning, Dr. Williams agreed to discharge me, though he insisted on daily nurse visits and strict limitations on my activities. James arranged everything, and by that afternoon, he was driving me home, neither of us knowing exactly what we would find when we got there. Amanda's face, when I walked through the front door of my own home, was a study in poorly concealed shock. She had clearly not expected to see me for several more days, if ever again. "Dad!" she exclaimed, her voice an octave too high. "What are you doing here?" "The hospital didn't call us. I asked them not to," I said, leaning on James for support as I surveyed what remained of my living room. "I wanted to surprise you." The surprise, however, was all mine. The room I had entered was barely recognizable as the one I had left 3 weeks earlier. The walls, once covered with family photographs and Marilyn's watercolor paintings, were now bare, except for a few generic prints. My comfortable old leather recliner, the one Marilyn had given me for our 30th anniversary, was gone, replaced by a sleek modern armchair I had never seen before. The bookshelves that had housed my collection of engineering texts and classic novels stood empty. "Where's all my stuff?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Amanda and Frank exchanged glances before she responded with artificial brightness. "We thought it was time to update the place. A lot of that old furniture was just collecting dust, and the doctors said you might need more space to move around safely during recovery." I moved slowly through the house, room by room, with James at my side. Each new space revealed more losses. In my bedroom, my clothes remained, but Marilyn's jewelry box, which I had kept on her dresser with her favorite pieces I couldn't bear to part with, was missing. So was the quilt her mother had made for our wedding, and the silver-framed wedding photo that had stood on my nightstand for over 4 decades. The den had been completely transformed into what appeared to be a home office for Frank, with a new desk and computer setup where my reading corner had been. The bookshelves that had contained Marilyn's beloved mystery novel collection were now filled with Frank's sports memorabilia and business books. In the kitchen, all of Marilyn's hand-painted ceramics and the copper pots we had brought back from our 20th anniversary trip to France were nowhere to be seen. Even the refrigerator magnets, holding years of family photos and children's artwork, had been removed, replaced by a sleek, uncluttered surface. "Where are Mom's things?" I asked Amanda, my heart pounding so hard I worried about my recent surgery. "Her jewelry? Our photos? The family albums?" Amanda waved her hand dismissively. "We had to make some decisions while you were gone, Dad. The house was just so cluttered, and the doctors weren't sure if you'd be coming home at all. Dr. Williams told us your surgery was very risky. So you just got rid of everything? Without waiting to see if I survived? My voice broke on the last word. We thought it would be easier this way, Frank interjected. Clean slate, you know. And Amanda was having a hard time seeing all those reminders of her mom everywhere. I looked at my daughter, this stranger who had apparently decided I was as disposable as my possessions. Those reminders of her mom were all I had left. Amanda. Did you think about that? Amanda had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before her expression hardened. It's just stuff, Dad. What matters is that you're okay. Where's my car? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear her admit it. We sold it, Frank answered before Amanda could speak. That old thing was just taking up space in the garage, and the insurance was costing you money every month. We put the cash in your account. Except you didn't, James spoke up for the first time since we'd entered the house. As Lionel's power of attorney during his hospital stay, I've been monitoring his accounts. No deposits matching the value of a classic Mustang have been made. Amanda's face flushed with anger. What are you doing with access to Dad's accounts? That's a family matter. James is family, I said quietly. He has been since before you were born. I made my way to my bedroom, needing a moment alone to process the magnitude of what had happened. The room felt sterile, stripped of personality. Even the photos of my grandchildren that had lined my dresser were gone. I sat heavily on the bed, which was at least still there, though the handmade quilt was replaced by a store-bought comforter I had never seen before. James followed me in and closed the door behind him. I'm so sorry, Lionel. It's worse than we thought. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I need to check something, he said, moving to my closet. He reached to the back of the top shelf and felt around, then sighed with relief as he pulled down a small fireproof box. At least they didn't find this. The box contained the documents we had prepared before my surgery. Copies of my will, property deeds, and other important papers. James had suggested hiding it as a precaution. I need to see the garage, I said suddenly, a thought occurring to me. We made our way there, past Amanda and Frank, who were having a heated whispered conversation in the kitchen. The garage, which had once been my sanctuary, was now being used as storage for boxes and new furniture still in packaging. My workbench, with all my carefully organized tools that I had collected over a lifetime, was completely gone. They've been busy, James commented grimly. I noticed something else. The trapdoor to the crawl space is open. Beneath a section of the garage floor was a small storage area where I kept Christmas decorations and other seasonal items. But more importantly, it was where I had hidden a waterproof container with some of Marilyn's most precious jewelry and our most irreplaceable family photos, things too valuable to keep in the open, but that I couldn't bear to lock away in a bank vault. I eased myself down with James's help and peered into the opening. The container was gone. Back in the house, Amanda approached me with a conciliatory smile. Dad, I know this is a shock, but you'll get used to the changes. We did what we thought was best given the circumstances. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to reconcile this person with the little girl I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager I had consoled through heartbreaks, the woman whose hand I had placed in Frank's at their wedding. I couldn't find that person anywhere in the cold, calculating eyes that met mine. I'm tired, I said finally. I need to rest. Once alone in my bedroom, I sent a text to James, who had left with assurances he would return in the morning. You were right all along. They've taken everything. Check the security footage from the cameras. And contact the bank. I think there's more we don't know yet. His response was immediate. Already on it. Try to rest. Don't let them know what we're doing. We'll make this right. I lay back on my bed, in a room I barely recognized, and allowed myself a moment of pure grief for all that had been lost. Not just the things, though each represented memories that could never be replaced, but the relationship with my daughter that I now realized had been broken long before I went into the hospital. As I drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the day's emotions and still recovering from major surgery, My last thought was of Tyler's face when he told me about the car. At least in him, I could still see traces of the compassion and integrity that seemed to have skipped a generation. The next morning, James returned as promised, bringing with him a laptop and a grim expression. He closed my bedroom door and set up the computer on the bed beside me. "You need to see this," he said, clicking on a video file. "The security cameras caught a lot while you were gone." The footage showed Amanda and Frank in the living room, the very day after my surgery, already making plans. "If he doesn't make it, we can list the house immediately," Frank was saying. "The market is hot right now." "And if he does make it?" Amanda asked. Frank shrugged. "The doctor said he'd need a lot of care. We can convince him a nursing home is the best option. Either way, we get the house." James clicked to another clip, this one from a week later, showing Amanda and Frank hosting what appeared to be an estate sale. Strangers were walking through my home, examining my possessions, haggling over prices. I watched in horror as a man handed Frank cash for Marilyn's antique secretary desk, the one her father had restored for her as a wedding present. "There's more," James said softly, clicking to another file. This one showed Amanda in my home office, going through my desk drawers until she found my checkbook and financial folders. She made several calls, each time imitating my voice to access my accounts and check balances. Then, with Frank holding a copy of my signature, she began writing checks to herself. I felt physically ill watching this betrayal unfold so methodically. "How much did they take?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Based on what I've found so far, nearly 40,000 from your checking account, plus they emptied the emergency cash box you kept in your closet. That's another 5,000. And there's no record of what they got from selling your possessions, but based on what was in the house, it could easily be another 30 to 40,000. "The crawl space," I said. "Did they find what was in there?" James nodded grimly and clicked to another video. This one showed Frank discovering the trap door while looking for storage space. The camera angle didn't show inside the crawl space, but it captured Frank emerging with the waterproof container, opening it, and calling excitedly for Amanda. Her expression, when she saw the contents, Marilyn's diamond engagement ring, her mother's pearl necklace, the gold pocket watch that had been my grandfather's, was one of undisguised greed. "Jackpot," she said, lifting out the jewelry. "This stuff has to be worth at least 50 grand. I closed my eyes, unable to watch anymore. These weren't just valuable items. They were pieces of my history, tangible connections to people I had loved and lost. "There's one more thing you need to see," James said, his voice heavy. "This is from 3 days ago." The video showed Amanda in my bedroom with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. She was showing him papers, the same papers I had signed in the hospital when I was heavily medicated. "As you can see, he's signed over power of attorney to me," she was saying. "And this one authorizes the sale of the house. We can close as soon as he's placed in permanent care." "These look good," the man said, examining the signatures. "Though it's unusual to do this without the primary party present. Dad's in no condition to handle these matters," Amanda replied smoothly. The stroke affected his cognitive abilities. I stared at the screen in shock. "Stroke? I didn't have a stroke. And I never signed papers to sell the house." "I know," James said grimly. "She lied to you about what you were signing, and she's lying to others about your condition. This is elder fraud, Lionel. It's criminal." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. Amanda hadn't just taken my things, she was actively working to take everything, including my home and my autonomy. "What do we do now?" I asked finally. James closed the laptop and looked me directly in the eyes. "Now we fight back, just like we planned. Are you ready?" I thought of all I had lost, not just possessions, but the daughter I thought I knew. I thought of Tyler and Haley, caught in the middle of their parents' greed. I thought of Marilyn, and how she would have urged me to stand up for myself while giving our daughter a chance for redemption. "I'm ready," I said, straightening my shoulders despite the pain from my surgery. "Let's do this." For the next 2 weeks, I played along with Amanda and Frank's narrative. I acted grateful for the decluttering they had done, pretended not to notice when familiar items disappeared from the remaining rooms, and feigned weakness greater than what I actually felt from my recovery. All the while, James and I were building our case. The hidden cameras continued to record, capturing damning conversations between Amanda and Frank about their plans for my house and the remaining assets they hadn't yet liquidated. James contacted my bank and put a complete freeze on all my accounts, something Amanda discovered only when attempting to write another check to herself from my checkbook. "The bank says there's a problem with the account," she told me, trying to sound concerned rather than panicked. "Something about suspicious activity. I'll need to go in with you to straighten it out." "Let me talk to James first," I replied mildly. "He might know what's going on." Her face tightened at the mention of James. "I don't understand why you keep involving him in family business. I'm your daughter. I should be handling these things." "You're right, you are my daughter," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "That's what makes this so hard to understand." A flicker of unease crossed her face before she composed herself. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, returning to the newspaper I was pretending to read. "I'm just tired." James was working methodically, contacting estate sale companies to track down items that had been sold, checking with storage facilities in the area, and building a legal case for financial elder abuse. He also reached out to my brother Donald, with whom I had a complicated relationship. Donald was 2 years younger than me, and we had grown apart after a dispute over our parents' estate 15 years earlier. He had felt I received preferential treatment in the will, while I believed the distribution reflected the care I had provided during their final years. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, but when James called to explain the situation, Donald didn't hesitate. "I'll be there tomorrow," he told James, who relayed the message to me. "Nobody messes with my big brother except me." True to his word, Donald arrived the next day, parking his RV in my driveway. Amanda was furious at the unexpected visitor, but could hardly turn away her uncle without raising suspicions. Donald brought with him a warmth and protective energy that I hadn't realized how much I had missed. "You look like hell, Lion," he said, using the childhood nickname only he ever used, as he enveloped me in a careful hug, mindful of my surgical scars. "Feel like it too," I admitted, "but better now that you're here." Donald made it clear he was staying for as long as Lionel needs me, setting up camp in the RV but spending most of his time in the house. His presence provided both emotional support and an additional witness to Amanda and Frank's behavior, as well as protection against any attempt to rush me out of my home. While all this was happening, I was also developing an unexpected friendship with my next-door neighbor, Evelyn Palmer. She was a retired literature professor, a widow like me, who had moved in about a year after Marilyn passed away. We had exchanged pleasantries over the years, but never really connected until she appeared at my door with a casserole and a concerned expression 3 days after I returned from the hospital. "I saw the estate sale," she said, without preamble when I invited her in. "It seems strange, you being in the hospital and all. I tried to tell them they couldn't sell your wife's piano, but that young man, your son-in-law, I think was quite rude about it." My heart sank. "They sold Marilyn's piano? The baby grand?" Evelyn nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I'm so sorry, Lionel. I should have done more to stop them." "There's nothing you could have done," I assured her. "But thank you for trying, and for telling me." After that, Evelyn became a regular visitor, often bringing food or simply sitting with me in what was left of my garden, sharing stories of her late husband and listening to mine about Marilyn. She had a sharp mind and an observant nature, and often reported things she had noticed, like the moving truck that had come late one night, or the jewelry appraiser she had seen arriving one afternoon while I was at a doctor's appointment. Most importantly, Evelyn provided a witness from outside the family who had seen the systematic dismantling of my home while I was incapacitated, something James assured me would be valuable if we needed to go to court. The most unexpected ally in all of this, however, was my grandson Tyler. One afternoon, while Amanda and Frank were out and Donald was napping in the RV, Tyler came into my room with a shoebox clutched tightly in his hands. "Grandpa," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I saved some things. I knew you would want them." Inside the box were treasures I had thought lost forever. The leather-bound journal Marilyn had kept for 40 years. A handful of photographs she had particularly loved. The pocket watch that had been my father's, and a small velvet pouch containing her wedding ring. "How did you manage this?" I asked, tears filling my eyes as I carefully touched each item. "I took them when Mom and Dad weren't looking," he admitted. "I knew it was wrong to take stuff, but it felt more wrong to let them sell everything. I have a few other things hidden in my closet, and I know where they're keeping a lot of the stuff they told you they threw away." I pulled my grandson into a gentle hug, mindful of my healing chest. "Thank you, Tyler. You have no idea what this means to me." "I hate what they're doing," he confessed, his voice breaking. "It's not right. Mom keeps saying you need special care and can't live alone anymore. But I know that's not true. You're getting stronger every day." Tyler began secretly feeding me information about his parents' activities, including the location of the storage unit where they had stashed many of the items they claimed were thrown away. He also confirmed my suspicion that the money from selling my car and other valuables had never been deposited in my accounts, but was instead being kept in a new account under Frank's name. James used this information to further build our case, documenting everything meticulously. He arranged for a private investigator to photograph the storage unit from outside, confirming that it contained furniture and boxes from my home. Meanwhile, Amanda's entitlement continued to grow. She took over the master bedroom, my bedroom, claiming I would be more comfortable in the smaller guest room with less to manage. She redecorated the living room again, this time with expensive new furniture that mysteriously appeared one day. She began hosting dinner parties for Frank's potential business contacts, as if the house were already hers. Most disturbingly, I discovered through one of the hidden cameras that she and Frank were actively researching nursing homes, not quality care facilities, but the cheapest options they could find, often an hour or more away from our town. "Once he's placed, we can finish cleaning out the house and list it," Frank said in one recorded conversation. "The realtor says we can get at least $350,000 in this market." "What about power of attorney?" Amanda asked. "We have it for healthcare decisions, but can we sell the house without his signature?" "The papers he signed give you authority to manage all his affairs, including property," Frank assured her. "And if he fights it, we'll have him declared incompetent." "Dr. Phillips says he'd support that." Dr. Phillips was a physician I had never met, certainly not my regular doctor. I was shocked to learn they had apparently been building a medical case against me as well, preparing for any resistance I might offer. The most chilling discovery, however, came when James had an expert examine the papers I had signed in the hospital. Not only had Amanda tricked me into signing over power of attorney and authorizing the sale of my house, but she had also had me sign a new will that left everything to her, completely cutting out Tyler and Haley, and invalidating all the charitable bequests Marilyn and I had planned for years. "This is beyond taking advantage," James said grimly. "This is calculated, systematic elder abuse. We have more than enough to take legal action now." "What about the kids?" I asked, thinking of Tyler's troubled face and Haley's increasing withdrawal as the household tension grew. "I don't want them hurt by this." "They're already being hurt," Donald pointed out. "They're watching their parents steal from their grandfather and lie about it." "What kind of lesson is that?" He was right, of course. And when I found out through Tyler that Amanda had been telling the kids I was becoming confused and paranoid, making up stories about missing items, I knew we couldn't wait any longer. She was not only stealing my possessions and money, but attempting to steal my credibility and relationship with my grandchildren as well. The final straw came when I overheard Amanda on the phone with someone from a nursing facility, scheduling a tour for the following week. She gave them my name and social security number, describing me as increasingly disoriented and unable to care for himself. That night, I texted James. "It's time. They're trying to put me in a home next week. Let's implement the plan." His response came quickly. "Everything is in place. I'll be there in the morning with the paperwork. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be challenging." I lay awake most of the night, mourning the daughter I had lost even while she was still under my roof, and steeling myself for the confrontation to come. I thought of Marilyn, and how heartbroken she would be to see what Amanda had become. But I also remembered her strength, how she had faced her cancer with unwavering courage. Sometimes love means standing your ground, she had told me once. I would need that courage now. In the morning, I found Marilyn's journal in the box Tyler had saved and opened it to a random page. Her handwriting jumped out at me, as familiar as my own. Love your children enough to let them face the consequences of their actions. It's the only way they grow. It felt like a message from beyond, a final piece of motherly wisdom when I needed it most. I closed the journal and placed it carefully back in its hiding place. Then I texted James. I'm ready. The confrontation began over dinner. I had asked Amanda to prepare a family meal, suggesting we needed to discuss the future. Assuming this meant I was finally ready to talk about assisted living options, she eagerly agreed, even inviting James and Donald to join us. The meal itself was tense, with Amanda shooting annoyed glances at James and Donald, while Frank maintained a false joviality, regaling us with stories of promising job prospects that never seemed to materialize. Tyler pushed food around his plate silently, while Haley, always sensitive to atmosphere, looked increasingly uncomfortable. After the main course, before Amanda could serve dessert, I cleared my throat. I want to thank you all for coming together tonight. As you know, my health has given us all a scare, and it's made me think about the future. Amanda perked up, exchanging a quick glance with Frank. That's exactly what we've been wanting to talk about, Dad. We've been looking into some really nice assisted living communities. Actually, I said calmly, I've been thinking about the house. Frank leaned forward eagerly. We've been thinking about that too. The market is really strong right now. If we listed soon. I'm not selling, I interrupted, watching their expressions fall. In fact, I'm planning some renovations. The garage needs to be rebuilt, and I'm thinking of adding a sunroom where your mother always wanted one. A heavy silence fell over the table. Amanda recovered first. Dad, be reasonable. This house is too much for you to manage, especially now. The doctor said you need to avoid stress and heavy activity. That's true, I agreed. Which is why I've hired a property management company to handle the maintenance, and a part-time aide to help with household tasks. That's a waste of money, Frank interjected. We're here to help you. Are you? I asked, looking directly at him. Because, from where I sit, it seems like you've been helping yourselves. Amanda's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I turned to James, who nodded and placed a thick folder on the table. I think it's time we discussed some discrepancies I've noticed since returning home. Like the fact that my car was sold without my permission? We explained that, Amanda said quickly. It was just taking up space. And the insurance, or the fact that $40,000 has disappeared from my checking account. I continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Frank shifted uncomfortably. There were a lot of expenses while you were sick. Medical bills, household needs. Or perhaps, I said, my voice growing quieter but more intense, we should talk about the storage unit on Maple Street, where you've been keeping the furniture and belongings you claimed were thrown away. The color drained from Amanda's face. How do you know about that? Or the new will I supposedly signed in the hospital, cutting out my grandchildren and giving everything to you? Dad, you're confused, Amanda said, her tone shifting to one of exaggerated concern. The medication must be affecting your memory. We never did anything like that. James opened the folder and began laying out documents. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, photos of my possessions in the storage unit, copies of the fraudulent papers I had signed in the hospital. We have it all documented, he said professionally, including video evidence of the discussions about selling Lionel's house and placing him in a care facility against his will. You've been spying on us? Frank demanded, his face reddening with anger. I've been protecting my client, James corrected, which became necessary when you began systematically stealing from him while he was hospitalized. That's ridiculous. Amanda's voice rose. We were organizing, downsizing. Dad knew about all of this. I shook my head sadly. I never agreed to sell my car, especially not without the proceeds being put in my account. I never agreed to you taking your mother's jewelry or selling her piano. And I certainly never agreed to be declared incompetent and shipped off to a nursing home while you sell my house out from under me. Tyler suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. Stop lying, Mom. Just stop. I heard you and Dad talking about selling Grandpa's things before he even went to the hospital. Amanda turned on him furiously. Stay out of this, Tyler. You don't understand adult matters. I understand stealing is wrong, he shot back, tears in his eyes. I understand you sold Grandma's things that Grandpa loved. I understand you've been lying to everyone, even Haley and me. Haley began to cry quietly, and Donald put a comforting arm around her shoulders, glaring at Amanda and Frank. You should be ashamed of yourselves, he said in a low, dangerous voice. Your own father. Your children watching. Frank suddenly pushed back from the table and stood, leaning toward me with an intimidating posture. This is all a misunderstanding that's gotten out of hand. We were trying to help you. And this is the thanks we get? You want to talk about stealing? How about stealing our lives? We've put our plans on hold for over a year to take care of you. Yet somehow you haven't managed to find a job in all that time, I observed quietly. Despite having plenty of time for golf and plenty of money for new clothes and electronics. Frank's face contorted with rage, and for a moment I thought he might actually strike me. James stood quickly, placing himself between us. That would be a very poor decision, he warned Frank. Assault charges on top of elder abuse and fraud would not look good. Amanda's tactical approach shifted instantly. Her face crumpled, and tears appeared in her eyes. Daddy, how could you think these terrible things about us? We love you. Everything we did was to make things easier for you after your surgery. If there was a misunderstanding about the car or some money, we can fix that. But to accuse us of trying to steal from you, the security cameras caught you, Amanda, I said softly. In your own words, planning to sell my house, talking about how convenient it would be if I didn't survive surgery, forging my signature, lying to people about my mental state. There's no misunderstanding. She stared at me, the fake tears drying up instantly. You've been recording us? In our own home? My home, I corrected. Which you were invited into temporarily when Frank lost his job. An invitation you've thoroughly abused. Haley's tears had turned to full sobs now, and Tyler moved to stand beside her, his arm replacing Donald's around her shoulders. What happens now? He asked me directly, ignoring his parents. It was the question I had been dreading. Despite everything, despite the theft and betrayal and lies, these were still my daughter and son-in-law, the parents of my beloved grandchildren. I had spent weeks building a legal case against them, but I had hoped, perhaps naively, that when confronted with the evidence, there might be remorse, explanation, some path to reconciliation. Instead, Amanda's expression had hardened into pure hostility, while Frank looked like he was calculating the odds of physically overwhelming both James and Donald. Now, I said, feeling every one of my 67 years, you have a choice. You can return everything you've taken, repay the money you've stolen, and find somewhere else to live. Or we can involve the police and let the courts decide. You would do that to your own daughter? Amanda asked incredulously. Send me to jail? You were willing to put me in a cut-rate nursing home and sell everything I own, I reminded her. What would you call that? A tense silence fell over the room, broken only by Haley's quieting sniffles. Finally, Amanda spoke, her voice cold and controlled. Fine. We'll return what we still have and repay what we can. But this is the end, Dad. Don't expect to be part of our lives after this. No more holidays, no more visits. You're choosing possessions over family. No, Amanda, I said tiredly. You made that choice weeks ago. I'm just refusing to be your victim. She stood abruptly. Come on, Frank Haley, we're leaving. But Tyler and Haley remained seated. Tyler spoke first. I'm staying with Grandpa, he said firmly. Someone needs to make sure you actually return his things. Don't be ridiculous, Frank snapped. You're coming home with us. Now. I'm 17, Tyler reminded him. In less than a year, I'll be able to live wherever I want. Do you really want to force this now? Haley looked up at her mother, then at me, her young face torn with an impossible decision no 14-year-old should have to make. Haley can decide for herself, I said gently. No one will think less of her whatever she chooses. Amanda grabbed her purse from where it hung on the back of her chair. This isn't over, she warned. Don't think you can turn my children against me and get away with it. You did that all by yourself, Donald muttered. With a final glare, Amanda stormed out, Frank following after giving us all a look that was equal parts hatred and humiliation. Haley burst into fresh tears as the front door slammed. What do I do? She asked, looking desperately between me and the door where her parents had just exited. What do you want to do, sweetheart? I asked her. I want everything to be like it was before, she cried. When Mom and Dad were happy, and you and Grandma were both here, and nobody was fighting. I know, I said, moving slowly to kneel beside her chair, despite the pain it caused my healing chest. I want that too. But right now, we need to deal with what is, not what we wish could be. If you go with Mom and Dad, we won't love you any less, Tyler assured her. I'll still see you at school. Haley looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Are you really going to call the police on Mom and Dad? I sighed heavily. I don't want to. But they took a lot of things that were very special to me. Things of your grandmother's that can't be replaced. If they return them, like they promised, then no, I won't involve the police. She nodded slowly, then stood. I should go with them, she said quietly. Mom gets really upset when she's alone. She might need me. My heart broke for this child, shouldering adult responsibilities that were never hers to carry. You're a good daughter, Haley. But remember, it's not your job to take care of your mom's feelings. That's for adults to handle. She gave me a quick, fierce hug, then ran out after her parents before she could change her mind. In the silence that followed, I looked around the table at the remains of our family dinner and the scattered evidence of Amanda and Frank's betrayal. James was already gathering the documents back into the folder, his face grim but satisfied that the confrontation had gone as well as could be expected. Donald was watching me with concern, ready to step in if my strength failed. And Tyler sat with his head in his hands, the weight of divided loyalties heavy on his young shoulders. I'm sorry you had to see that, Tyler, I said softly. He looked up, his expression far older than his 17 years. I'm not. It needed to happen. They've been talking about selling the house and putting you in a home for weeks, thinking I couldn't hear through the vents. They said terrible things, Grandpa, about you and about Grandma's things being worthless junk they could finally get rid of. I winced at the cruelty. Marilyn had always been good to Amanda, covering for her mistakes, supporting her through difficult times, being the mediator when she and I butted heads during her teenage years. What happens now? Tyler asked, echoing his earlier question. I looked at James, who had been my rock through all of this. Now we see if they keep their word about returning what they took, and we rebuild, one day at a time. And if they don't keep their word? Donald asked, the protective younger brother ready to fight my battles. Then we do what we have to do, I said, feeling the weight of that potential decision. But for tonight, I think we've all had enough. Tyler, are you sure you want to stay? Your parents won't be happy. I'm sure, he said firmly. Somebody needs to be on your side. As James and Donald cleared the table and Tyler went to prepare the guest room where he would stay, I remained seated, exhausted by the emotional toll of the confrontation, but also feeling a strange sense of relief. The worst had happened. My daughter had chosen greed over love, possessions over family bonds, and yet I had survived. Just as I had survived the loss of Marilyn, just as I had survived the surgery that Amanda had hoped might solve her problems permanently. There was grief, yes, deep and profound. But there was also a glimmer of something I hadn't expected: freedom. Freedom from pretending I didn't notice what was happening. Freedom from the constant tension of living with people who wished I wasn't there. And perhaps most importantly, freedom to rebuild what was left of my life on my own terms. I thought again of Marilyn's words in her journal. Love your children enough to let them face the consequences of their actions. It's the only way they grow. I had done that tonight, painful as it was. Now it was up to Amanda to decide what kind of person she wanted to be going forward. I could only hope that somewhere beneath the greed and entitlement, there remained something of the daughter we had raised to know right from wrong. As I finally rose from the table, James appeared at my elbow, offering support I didn't want to admit I needed. "One step at a time," he said quietly. "We'll get through this." "We will," I agreed, thinking not just of the legal battles potentially ahead, but of the emotional healing that would be necessary for all of us, especially Tyler and Haley. We've come too far to do anything else. The days following our confrontation unfolded in a series of tense, legal maneuvers and emotional aftershocks. Amanda and Frank initially stonewalled, ignoring James's formal letters demanding the return of my property and repayment of the stolen funds. When they finally responded through a hastily hired attorney, it was with counter-accusations. I was mentally unstable. They had been acting in my best interests. The gifts they had received were freely given. James was undeterred. "This is exactly what we expected," he assured me. "They're trying to establish a narrative before we take further action." A week after the confrontation, with no meaningful progress toward resolution, James filed a formal police report documenting the theft and fraud. The detective assigned to the case, a compassionate woman named Detective Santos, came to the house to take my statement and review our evidence. "Unfortunately, we see a lot of these cases," she told me, as she examined the financial records and video evidence. "Elder exploitation is one of the fastest-growing forms of abuse, especially by family members. The difference is that most victims don't have the kind of documentation you've gathered." 2 days later, Amanda and Frank were served with search warrants for their storage unit and financial records. The storage unit revealed the extent of what they had taken. Not just furniture and household items, but boxes of family photographs, albums, letters, my academic awards and publications, even Marilyn's recipe collection that I had thought was simply thrown away. Most disturbingly, they had kept keys to the house, which James immediately arranged to have rekeyed. The financial investigation uncovered even more than we had initially suspected. In addition to the empty checking account, they had attempted to access my retirement accounts and had taken out a line of credit against the house, using the fraudulent power of attorney documents. The total amount stolen or attempted to be stolen exceeded $180,000. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the real possibility of criminal charges, Amanda and Frank suddenly became cooperative. Through their attorney, they agreed to return all property still in their possession, to provide information on items they had sold so attempts could be made to recover them, and to repay the financial losses over time. "They're trying to avoid jail," James explained, when I expressed surprise at the sudden reversal. "Their attorney has probably explained that the evidence against them is damning, and their best hope is to make restitution and hope for leniency." The return of my possessions was a bittersweet process. Each recovered item brought both joy at its return and pain at the knowledge that my own daughter had taken it. Some things were gone forever, sold to strangers. Marilyn's piano, my restored Mustang, several pieces of antique furniture that had been in our family for generations. But many treasures did come back. Photo albums, Marilyn's jewelry box, though missing several valuable pieces that had already been sold, my academic awards, and most importantly, the personal letters and mementos that held sentimental rather than monetary value. Throughout this process, Tyler remained with me, having moved into the guest room permanently after a heated confrontation with his parents when he went to collect his belongings. At 17, he was old enough that forcing him to return home would have been both legally challenging and emotionally damaging. Frank, in particular, had apparently been furious about Tyler's betrayal, using his phone to record Frank's threatening behavior, which only strengthened our position when Tyler formally requested to live with me instead. "I can't be in that house anymore," he told me after returning with his clothes and personal items. "Dad broke my laptop when I refused to delete the videos, and Mom just stood there and watched. They're not the people I thought they were." Haley's situation was more complicated. At 14, she had less legal autonomy, and initially, she remained with Amanda and Frank. But the household atmosphere was toxic, with her parents' anger and frustration over the legal proceedings often spilling over onto her. She began spending weekends with me, the only time she seemed to relax and behave like the cheerful girl she had once been. 3 weeks into this arrangement, Haley called me in tears late one night. Amanda had been drinking heavily and had gotten into a screaming match with Frank about whose fault it was that they were facing potential criminal charges. When Haley had tried to intervene, Amanda had slapped her. "Can you come get me, Grandpa?" she sobbed through the phone. "I don't want to be here anymore." I called Detective Santos, who arranged for a patrol car to accompany me to Amanda's apartment. The scene we found was chaotic. Amanda, belligerent and clearly intoxicated, Frank trying to downplay the situation, and Haley huddled in her room with a small suitcase already packed. With the officers present as witnesses, I was able to take Haley home with me that night, and James filed for emergency temporary custody the next morning. The family court hearing that followed was perhaps the most painful part of the entire ordeal. Amanda appeared with dark circles under her eyes, alternating between tearful pleas for understanding and bitter accusations about me turning her children against her. The judge, an older woman with decades of experience in family court, saw through the performance. "Mrs. Reeves," she said sternly, using Amanda's married name, "the court has reviewed the evidence of your behavior toward your father, including the financial exploitation and theft of his possessions. We've also reviewed the police report regarding the incident with your daughter. At this time, I am granting temporary custody of both minor children to their grandfather, with supervised visitation for you and your husband, contingent on your completion of anger management and substance abuse evaluation." Amanda's face crumpled in genuine despair, and for a moment, I saw a flash of my little girl in the troubled woman before me. Despite everything, my heart ached for her. This wasn't the outcome I had wanted when I first discovered what she had done. I had only wanted my possessions returned and my autonomy respected. Now my daughter was facing not only the loss of her children, but possible criminal charges as well. As we left the courtroom, I asked James to give me a moment alone with Amanda. Frank had already stormed out, furious at the judge's decision. "Amanda," I said quietly, "this isn't what I wanted." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What did you expect would happen when you called the police on your own daughter?" "I expected you to return what you took and apologize," I said honestly. "I never wanted it to go this far." "It's too late now," she said bitterly. "You've won. You've taken everything from me." I shook my head sadly. "No, Amanda. You had a choice at every step. You chose to take my things, to try to steal my house, to lie about my mental capacity. Even after you were caught, you chose to fight rather than make amends. These are the consequences of those choices. So that's it? You're just writing me off?" "No," I said firmly. "You're my daughter, and I will always love you. But I don't trust you right now, and neither does the court. If you want to rebuild that trust, you need to do the work. Complete the programs the judge ordered. Make restitution for what you took. Show your children that people can change and make amends for their mistakes." She looked away, a mixture of shame and defiance on her face. "And if I do all that, will I get my kids back?" "That's up to the court," I said honestly. "And to Tyler and Haley. They're old enough to have a say in where they live. But if you want a relationship with them going forward, you need to start by respecting their feelings and acknowledging the harm you've caused." It wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for, but as I walked away from Amanda in that courthouse hallway, I felt I had at least opened a door to the possibility of healing, however distant it might be. The next few months were focused on rebuilding the children's sense of security, my home environment, and my own health, which had suffered from the stress of the ordeal. Tyler and Haley settled into life with me, adjusting to new routines and the absence of their parents except for the weekly supervised visits, which were initially tense and awkward. Donald extended his stay indefinitely, moving his RV to a long-term site nearby and becoming a regular presence in our household. His gruff exterior concealed a gentle heart, especially with Haley, who discovered his secret talent for braiding hair, a skill he had learned as a young father to Amanda before our estrangement. "I should never have let us grow apart," he told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Maybe if I'd been around more, I could have seen what was happening with Amanda before it went so far." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "But we're here now, and the kids need us both." My friendship with Evelyn next door deepened as well. She became a surrogate grandmother to Tyler and Haley, teaching Haley to bake using Marilyn's recovered recipes and engaging Tyler in conversations about literature that sparked a new interest in reading. For me, she provided something I hadn't realized how much I had missed: adult companionship with someone who understood loss and resilience. James continued to manage the legal aspects of the situation, negotiating a plea deal for Amanda and Frank that included probation, community service, and mandatory counseling, in exchange for full restitution and no jail time. It was more lenient than many thought they deserved, but I couldn't bear the thought of my grandchildren having parents in prison, regardless of what they had done. The most unexpected development in the aftermath came from Frank. During one of the supervised visits, he asked to speak with me privately while Amanda was spending time with the children. "I need to show you something," he said, pulling out his phone. "I've been recording Amanda for months." The recordings were disturbing. Amanda plotting to have me declared incompetent, discussing how to isolate me from friends who might notice what was happening, laughing about selling items she knew were precious to me. Frank had apparently started making these recordings as insurance for himself, in case things went wrong and he needed leverage. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked, feeling sick at the calculated cruelty in my daughter's voice. "Because I'm filing for divorce," he said bluntly. Amanda wasn't always like this. When we first met, she was kind, generous. Something changed after her mother died. It was like a switch flipped, and suddenly everything was about what she could get, what she deserved. I went along with it because it was easier than fighting, and yes, because I benefited too. But I never wanted it to go as far as it did. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motivation. "Are you hoping this will reduce your own culpability?" He nodded, at least honest enough not to pretend. "Partly yes, I did wrong, and I'm paying for it. But I also want Tyler and Haley to eventually know that I tried to make it right in the end. That I'm not the monster they probably think I am." I didn't absolve Frank. He had been an active participant in the theft and fraud, but I did provide the recordings to James, who used them to further strengthen the case against Amanda while negotiating slightly better terms for Frank in recognition of his cooperation. 6 months after my return from the hospital, life had achieved a new normal. Tyler had been accepted to the state university on a partial scholarship, planning to study engineering like his grandfather. Haley had joined the school choir, finding her voice literally and figuratively as she processed the trauma of the past year through music. The house was slowly being refurnished, some items recovered, others replaced, creating a blend of old memories and new beginnings. Amanda was complying with the terms of her probation, attending therapy twice weekly and alcohol counseling. Her visits with the children were gradually becoming less strained, though real healing would take much longer. Frank had moved to a neighboring state for a fresh start after the divorce was finalized, maintaining contact with the children through weekly video calls and monthly supervised visits. As for me, I had learned profound lessons about trust, forgiveness, and standing up for myself. The betrayal by Amanda had been devastating, but it had also brought unexpected gifts: reconciliation with Donald, new friendship with Evelyn, and a deeper relationship with my grandchildren than I might otherwise have had. One evening, as I sat with Tyler on the front porch swing that had been recovered from the storage unit, he asked me a question that caught me by surprise. "Grandpa, do you think Mom will ever change? Really change, I mean?" I considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe people can change if they truly want to. Your mother has a long road ahead, but I see small signs that she's beginning to understand the consequences of her actions. Whether that leads to genuine change, only time will tell." "I want to forgive her," he admitted, "but I don't know how." "Forgiveness doesn't happen all at once," I told him, thinking of my own journey. "And it doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It means choosing not to let that hurt control your future. It's something you do as much for yourself as for the person who wronged you. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. Like you're doing with Mom. I'm trying, I said honestly. Every day I'm trying. And I was. Because despite everything, Amanda was still my daughter. Still the little girl who had once looked at me like I hung the moon. Still someone I loved beyond reason or fairness. Justice had been necessary, boundaries essential, but I had never stopped hoping that somewhere on the other side of all this pain, reconciliation might be possible. As the legal proceedings wound down and the focus shifted from punishment to restitution and healing, I found myself reflecting on Marilyn's journal entry about letting children face consequences. She had been right, as she so often was. Amanda was finally facing the reality of what she had done, and though the process was painful for all involved, it was the only path to potential growth. In the quiet moments, when the house was still and memories flooded back, I sometimes wondered what Marilyn would make of all that had happened. I liked to think she would be proud of how I had handled things, protecting myself while keeping the door open for redemption. She had always been the wiser, more compassionate one in our marriage, teaching me by example how to balance justice with mercy. The journey ahead remained uncertain. There were no guarantees that Amanda would complete the inner work necessary for true change, no assurances that our family would ever fully heal from this breach of trust. But for the first time since coming home from the hospital to find my life dismantled, I felt genuine hope for the future, not the naive hope that everything could go back to how it was before, but the mature hope that something new and meaningful could still be built from the fragments that remained. A year after my surgery, I stood in my backyard, surveying the garden that Haley and I had restored together. Marilyn's roses were blooming again, and the vegetable patch was thriving under Tyler's careful tending. The garage had been rebuilt, not quite the same as before, but functional and full of new tools to replace those that had been sold. Most importantly, the house felt like a home again, filled with the sounds of family and the tangible presence of memories preserved. The legal battle was finally over. Amanda and Frank had completed their court-ordered restitution payments, returning what possessions could be recovered, and providing financial compensation for those that couldn't. The criminal charges had been resolved with probation rather than incarceration, a mercy I had requested for my grandchildren's sake. Tyler was finishing his freshman year at college, coming home on weekends to share stories of classes and new friends. He had inherited my aptitude for engineering and Marilyn's compassion, a combination that made me immeasurably proud. The damaged relationship with his mother was slowly mending, though trust was still a fragile work in progress. Haley, now 15, had blossomed under the stability of our household. The traumatized, tearful girl of a year ago had given way to a confident young woman who excelled in school and had found her voice both literally, in the choir, and figuratively, in standing up for herself. She spent alternating weekends with Amanda, who had maintained her sobriety and completed an intensive therapy program focused on boundary issues and emotional regulation. Donald had become a permanent part of our extended family, purchasing a small house just a few blocks away. Our brotherly bond, broken for so many years over a petty inheritance dispute, had been restored in the crucible of this far more significant family crisis. We now met for coffee every morning, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. Perhaps the most unexpected development had been my relationship with Evelyn. What had begun as neighborly support during a difficult time had gradually evolved into something deeper. We had both loved and lost spouses, understood grief and resilience, and found in each other a companion for this later chapter of life. 6 months earlier, I had asked her to dinner properly, as she put it, and we had been seeing each other regularly ever since. The most challenging but necessary work had been with Amanda. Her initial anger and denial had slowly given way to grudging acceptance and, eventually, genuine remorse. The supervised visits with her children had expanded to include occasional overnight stays, with the court monitoring her progress. Frank, now living in Colorado with a new job and girlfriend, maintained cordial co-parenting communication with Amanda for the children's benefit. On a warm Saturday in May, Exactly 1 year after my return from the hospital, I hosted a family gathering in the backyard. Donald manned the grill, Evelyn brought her famous potato salad, and Tyler returned from college with his new girlfriend in tow. Haley played the keyboard we had purchased to replace Marilyn's piano, her fingers growing more confident with each song. Amanda arrived last, carrying a small wrapped package and looking nervous. She had been invited to family gatherings before, but usually kept to herself, still uncomfortable with the new dynamic. This time, she approached me directly while the others were engaged in conversation. "Dad, can we talk for a minute?" she asked, gesturing toward the garden bench Marilyn and I had placed under the old oak tree years ago. When we were seated, she handed me the package. "It's not much," she said quietly, "but I wanted you to have it today." Inside was a framed photograph I had thought lost forever. Marilyn and me on our 40th wedding anniversary, dancing in our backyard while family and friends surrounded us. It had been one of the last gatherings before her diagnosis, a moment of pure joy captured perfectly. "How did you find this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "It wasn't lost," Amanda admitted, her eyes downcast. "I kept it, even when I was getting rid of other things. I couldn't bring myself to sell it or throw it away. It reminded me of how things used to be, before I became." She trailed off, unable to find the words for what she had become. "Thank you," I said simply, running my fingers over the frame. "This means more than you know." "Dad," she began hesitantly, "I know sorry isn't enough for what I did. The therapist says I need to make amends, not just apologize. But I don't know how to make amends for something so terrible." I studied my daughter's face, seeing in it traces of both Marilyn and myself, along with the lines of hardship she had largely brought upon herself. "Do you understand now why what you did was wrong?" I asked. It wasn't an accusation, but a genuine question. She nodded slowly. "I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I stopped seeing you as my father. You became an obstacle, then a resource, but never a person with feelings and rights of your own. The therapist says it's called objectification, turning people into things instead of recognizing their humanity. And now," I prompted, "now, I see what I lost," she said, her voice breaking. "Not just my children's trust or my freedom or my marriage. I lost myself, the person I was raised to be, the daughter you and Mom deserved." There was genuine pain in her eyes, not the manipulative tears she had tried to use during our confrontation a year ago, but the raw grief of someone facing the full reality of their actions. "The thing about being lost," I said gently, "is that sometimes you can find your way back." "Do you really believe that?" she asked, a fragile hope in her voice. "After everything I did?" I thought about it carefully, not wanting to offer false comfort. "I believe in the possibility of redemption," I said finally. "Not erasing the past, but building a different future. Your mother believed that too. She always said people could change if they wanted it badly enough." "I do want it," Amanda whispered. "I want to be someone my children can be proud of again. Someone you can trust again, even if that takes years." "Then that's where we start," I said, placing my hand over hers. "One day at a time." Our conversation was interrupted by Haley calling us to the table, where Donald had arranged the steaks and burgers on a large platter. As we joined the others, I noticed Tyler watching his mother cautiously, still protective of me after all that had happened. I gave him a reassuring nod, and he relaxed slightly, making room for Amanda at the table. It wasn't perfect. The wounds were still healing, the trust still rebuilding, the family still finding its new balance. But as I looked around at this, gathering my brother who had returned to my life, my grandchildren who had shown such courage and resilience, my neighbor who had become something more, and even my daughter who was taking the first tentative steps toward redemption, I felt profound gratitude. After dinner, as twilight settled over the yard and Evelyn helped Haley clear the plates, Tyler approached me with a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Grandpa, how did you know to prepare for what Mom and Dad might do? With the cameras and the documents and everything? It's like you expected it." I considered how to answer truthfully without demonizing his mother further. "I didn't know for certain," I said, "but there were signs I couldn't ignore. And your grandmother always taught me to hope for the best, but prepare for difficulties. I'm glad you fought back," he said quietly. "A lot of people in your position wouldn't have had the strength." "Everyone has strength they don't know about until they need it," I told him. "The real challenge is using that strength wisely, not just to protect yourself, but to leave room for healing." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, then asked the question that had been haunting all of us in different ways. "Do you think our family will ever be normal again?" I smiled at the earnestness in his face, so young, yet so burdened with adult concerns. "Normal is just what you're used to, Tyler. We're creating a new normal now. It might not look like what we had before, but that doesn't mean it can't be good in its own way." Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, I sat on the porch swing with the photograph Amanda had returned, studying Marilyn's face in the fading light. She would have been heartbroken by what happened, but I like to think she would have approved of how we were finding our way forward. She had always believed in second chances. The lessons of the past year had been hard-won, but invaluable. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but necessary. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. That family bonds can break, but also heal, sometimes stronger at the mended places. And most importantly, that it's never too late to rebuild what matters most. As I finally went inside, placing the photograph on the mantel where it belonged, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, there was still much work to be done, many conversations to be had, many small steps toward full reconciliation, but the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The betrayal had been real and painful, but it hadn't defined me, hadn't broken me. Instead, it had revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed and connections I might otherwise have missed. In the quiet of the house, with my grandchildren sleeping safely down the hall, and the fragrance of Marilyn's roses drifting through the open window, I offered a silent thank you to James for his unwavering support, to Donald for returning when I needed him most, to Tyler and Haley for their courage, to Evelyn for her kindness, and even to Amanda for taking those first difficult steps toward change, and most of all to Marilyn, whose wisdom continued to guide me even in her absence. Love your children enough to let them face the consequences of their actions. It's the only way they grow. She had been right, as she so often was. The path to healing wasn't in avoiding difficult truths, but in facing them directly, with courage and compassion in equal measure. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in many months, no longer haunted by what had been lost, but comforted by what remained and what might yet be built. The journey hadn't been one I would have chosen, but the destination, this hard-won wisdom, this deeper appreciation for life's true treasures, was worth every painful step along the way. Have you ever had to confront a family member who betrayed your trust? How did you balance justice with the desire to preserve family relationships? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone in facing family difficulties. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and wisdom in your own family challenges.